All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10:45 here on this beautiful Thursday, March 13th. Thank you for those of you that are joining us live. Also, for those that may be listening to the recording or utilizing the slides offered here. You'll hear from Charlie, myself, Eric, and Laura today. Lisa is down managing girls basketball, and Phil's getting ready for boys basketball. I believe he's on the call with us here today. And we really want to thank those of you that have hosted our section contests this year, either managed it or hosted at your schools. Great job in doing so. Our crowds, it's symbolic of the popularity of what you do, but also just the management and the preparation for those tournaments. We're preparing for our spring seasons as well. Many begin or have begun, and just want to look forward to boys volleyball inaugural season, which begins on Monday the 17th as well. So we have a full agenda for today, and we're going to work through that with the time that we have. Again, know that these slides are available following today's presentation. Also want to identify our liaisons again and just thank them for the feedback they get from all parts of the state. At this time, I'm going to turn over to Eric to give us updates. Eric?
Thanks, Bob, and good morning, everybody. I just want to provide a quick update since our previous lead meeting. That took place on February 13th, and that was just a few days after the presidential executive order relating to transgender student participation in Title IX. Upon receiving that executive order and taking a look at state law, our association understood that we were stuck between two different policies. And we reached out the day after our lead meeting on February 14th, and in partnership with both our Superintendents and Principals Association, sent a letter requesting opinion from our Minnesota Attorney General relative to the rules that were in place. Not that long after February 20th, we received that response back, and I believe that's been shared, but in essence indicated that the state laws of Minnesota remain in place, and we are subject to those at the same time as being subject to the executive orders. And so in essence, our position hasn't changed. Other things that have taken place, there was an attempt through the Minnesota House. A bill was passed through the Education Policy Committee. That did go to the House floor on March 3rd. It did not pass out of the Minnesota House of Representatives at that time. So again, there has not been a change within that. And so in the current scenario that we're in, the Minnesota State High School League and its member schools are still in a position, a bit of a catch-22 between two sets of rules that exist at this time. We continue to work on that and work with other states in similar situations to identify the best path forward here as we continue forward. And at the same time, great work by all of you as we continue through our activities and do a great job. So with that, Bob, anything you want to add to it? Welcome to do so.
No, I would just say, Eric, we continue to just thank you for your service and staying tuned with what's happening along with Roger and Kevin, right, on the legal side of things to assist us. As soon as something does change, or if we hear something, you'll be the first to know, either in a format like this or in written communication as well. Otherwise, we've been spending a lot of time on competitive section placement. As of late, that is a very popular topic. I see many of you on this call today. We've spent a lot of time together the last 2 days. Some of you here were involved in the appeals yesterday, and others are waiting to hear back on where your schools will fall. So just a reminder again on popular questions that we continue to get. This is a rounding and balancing year. We will make as few moves as possible to try and round and balance those sections, especially when some schools have bounced between two different classifications. Do not forget about geographic contiguity as you start to see those maps. We would not jump over one school to get to another to put them in a competitive section placement. We're also trying to consider like sports where there are boys and girls, doing the best we can to consider those in the same sections. Not always possible as some are even in different classes. Please note the timeline. We continue to update that. As long as we have to wait for our MDE enrollments, we are on track with what our timeline was and projected at the beginning of the year. We're going to get classification cutoffs for the other non-team sports out. You will hear early next week on your appeal results if you did file an appeal. And then executive committee will be meeting tomorrow to look at those recommendations made by our AD's advisory yesterday. And just want to recognize this group that has spent 12 hours and 2 days on appeals. Please know that we're not going to be able to talk to every school on your results. We will be sending those out in, and again, a format that you can read. Having to explain it will take an extreme amount of time that we don't have right now, as we will begin working on maps. For those names that are have a star by them or an asterisk, those are that's a group of people that spent 5 hours scoring the rubrics, the narrative side of the information that schools provided, 70 plus schools, as you'll see on the next slide. The remainder, including the starred or asterisk individuals, spent 7 hours yesterday hearing appeals, making difficult recommendations in each of our team sports on who should be allowed to play at a lower level. Reminder that you're only able to compete at one level lower than you were assigned by your MSHSL enrollment. Some trends that we noticed and tendencies that we're starting to see is that there have been some enrollment swings. Some have dropped significantly, some have increased quite significantly. The cutoffs, again, have changed since the most recent process by the largest amounts in some of our sports. And schools that didn't anticipate that cutoff, some of them missed that opt-up. We need to continue to work to make sure schools can predict when you're in that area that you want to be in a desired class that you would need to opt up. Also, some of the schools that are requesting changes after deadlines, we have to stay within those deadlines as they will impact all of our classes. We continue to look at educational benefits and or free and reduced populations. Again, we believe it's consistent across the state, yet some would say maybe the number is lower due to how those numbers are calculated or students or lack thereof identifying through a form through MDE. So we have to continue to look at that, although we believe that our MSHSL enrollments are consistent. Again, we had 220 appeals by 70 plus schools. That is a lot. I would say most of them didn't have a chance, right? Some of you appealed knowing that what the answer was, but felt like you had to do so in support of your community. Others of you aren't quite sure how that appeal would work. But what that AD's advisory group did is they created lines. And some of you are at the bottom of that. Some of you rose to the top very quickly, depending on your success factor, along with the dynamics within your community. And again, we spent 12 hours on doing the best we could to make those decisions. Remember that AD's advisory did make recommendations. Ultimately, our executive committee will look at those recommendations and decide from there. We will get information out to you as early as we can next week. All right. At this time, do not forget about ninth grade governance and the monumental lift that we're making here with that. Eric, further updates on ninth grade governance and where we are going. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Bob. And I just want to reinforce the fact that our association is a membership-driven organization. And I think our significant process in classification and competitive section placement is a great indication of that. You saw the list of folks who have given greatly in terms of their time. We have outstanding representation in so many different committees. Another group, and you don't see the names yet, but we'll get them up on the next lead. Our task force in ninth grade governance has been incredible with 90-minute meetings pretty much every other week since we started this almost a year ago now. And they continue to dig through and work through all of the bylaws and policies that we have. Our 100 and 500 series bylaws have been approved by the board to go to rep assembly. You can see that at the top. That happened at our most recent meeting. In the coming meeting, we will be looking to have our board approve the 200, 300, and 400 series of bylaws with the amendments to make sure that we gather all of the thoughts and factors for ninth grade governance. We also have board policies that will be continued to be reviewed. We would look for those to be approved by the board in June following that rep assembly meeting, because that is where the vote would take place to put those new bylaws into place. And then we follow up with the board to approve any policies that would need to be adjusted based on adding ninth grade in. And then finally, within the handbook, things for you to look for as we get to next year. And the task force has been really appreciative and actually excited about the addition of this. In the back of the handbook, we are moving from a keyword reference, which just tells you where to find it, to actually a glossary of terms that will help to more clearly identify what the definition of a term is when it's being used. And so when you read through that and you see something like a bona fide residence change, you now can look that up and say, what does that actually mean and what's all a part of that? And so it still will have the reference back to the bylaw we're talking about, but it will create, we believe, a more consistent and accurate interpretation of the bylaws as they're written. Finally, we think about tools that will be helpful for our ADs. Again, we'll talk about this more at the coming MNI AAA conference, but question and answer models for our ADs, perhaps before the school year even ends this year, to have some of those to take a look at and start planning for the addition of ninth grade into your programs and to be State High School League sanctioned. And so lots moving on this front, a very significant change within the league. And we believe that, especially based on the work of the task force, that this is going to be a successful implementation as we head into next year. Bob, what might I have missed in that explanation?
I think you nailed it, Eric. I would say not only great work by our task force, but based on the questions from our membership, you are staying in tune with this topic and asking very good questions. We do not want any surprises coming out of this. We want an educated membership so that when this does pass on May 13th, we're ready to go and plan for next year. Speaking of planning, as we looked at our tournaments from this winter and starting to look at the spring, we identified with our lead liaisons that we have some negligence with some of our coaches going into those tournaments. We're finding out that they haven't completed those CERs, which makes all of us nervous. And Charlie's responsible for coaches' education. Charlie, bring us up to speed on what we've heard and where we're going.
Great. Thanks, Bob. And good morning, everybody. As you mentioned earlier in the meeting, we rely heavily on the liaisons. And so one of the key discussion items between league staff and liaisons on Tuesday this week was, in fact, the coach education requirements. It's important to note these requirements originate in state statute and are clarified, implemented, and monitored through the league's board policy. And the policies apply to all of our member schools. The coach education requirements also apply to all coaches. Doesn't matter how you might designate them locally, as school paid, volunteer, booster paid, alumni coaches, etc. A coach is a coach is a coach. Compliance ensures that coaches are prepared for the season, and it also reduces risk for students and limits the liability for both the coaches and your school, as Bob mentioned earlier. It is frustrating that nearly 1 in 5 coaches this winter, prior to state tournaments, have not completed those requirements. And it's a shared frustration. It's shared amongst coaches. It's shared by ADs and league staff. But more importantly, we have 20% of coaches in our state tournaments that are increasing the risk to participants and increasing the liability to both themselves and to your schools. And so knowing that information, we have some tools and resources. Liaisons also shared some great ideas. One of those resources is a reporting tool within your dashboards to help you track compliance. It's been developed with extensive user feedback. You will find more details today on maximizing that coach education report as a compliance tool when the update gets sent out. And thanks to Laura for preparing that information. Liaisons shared ideas for improving compliance, earlier checks, better communication from the league, and even some best practices locally. Ultimately, monitoring coach education really becomes priority, just like student eligibility and official eligibility is in your office. So again, just appreciate your attention to that and the steps you can take within your office to ensure that coaches are meeting those requirements. Bob, before we move on to quick takes, I would just toss it back to you for any further commentary.
No, I appreciate it, Charlie. And our state tournaments should be a celebration, right? And for you to be able to enjoy that, getting that work done up front, I would say this is something we our membership and the Minnesota State High School League need to get better at. This will be a topic you'll continue to hear about as we try and create solutions to do so. We have a lot of important items coming up here in the near future, Charlie, starting with M&I AAA, where we hope to see many of you. Let's get to our quick takes, and back to you, Charlie.
Great, thanks, Bob. Yes, the M&I AAA conference is fast approaching. Registration is open, so be sure to register and attend if you're able to do so. League staff, again, will have a presence there and are planning to attend. We will also offer sessions designed to inform and assist you in your role as AD. Make sure you're familiar with the rules for exhibitions in each sport that you offer, especially as it relates to the participation of an ineligible athlete. Rules differ from sport to sport, and understanding what is or is not allowed is critical for compliance and consistency. I think of the example of a track meet that does not have exhibition heats or language that allows for exhibition heats or junior high heats within a varsity contest. So again, just be aware, and if you have questions, please reach out to the administrator here in the league office that directs the sport in which you have questions. We suggest gathering participation data seasonally, so please do so for those winter activities as they are wrapping up in your school. Again, this data helps us to track trends, plan effectively, and be excellent stewards of your membership dues. As I mentioned previously, today's update will be landing in your inbox later today. It will have an abundance of relevant information, including enrollment cutoffs for those non-team sports and activities across the league. You've received now, obviously last week, those cutoffs for, for those team sports, and expect more information in today's update for the non-team sports and activities. Thinking about bylaw 411, reminder that there's board policy. It's page 83 of your handbook that requires teams that travel out of state for practice to submit a request for approval. Many of you have done so, and thank you for doing that in accordance with the policy. Also, for those that are traveling, it would be wise to do a careful review of bylaw 411 with those coaches that are taking students out of state. Pay special attention to the scrimmage limitations and the rule that prohibits team events on Sundays. And finally, the league's board of directors, recognizing the importance and complexity of student eligibility with today's varied educational models and settings. And so they have authorized an ad hoc committee to study the issue and provide policy recommendations to the full board for consideration. The committee members are going to be finalized soon, and work is planned to begin yet this spring. Eric, I said that very briefly, but wonder if there's maybe more information you might share with the group before we move on to our checklist slides with Laura.
Thanks, Charlie. I would just add in that we've had more creation of new models of education over the last 5 years, probably than at any time in our history. And as we continue to think about that and look at situations that our students are in and where they're choosing to get their education, continuing to have our rules specifically around eligibility and participation be in place in a good way. I think that it's important that we continue to review and discuss and talk about what flexibility or adjustments we might need within our bylaws to address those situations. So we already have a dozen or so folks who've indicated interest. We're looking for a few more and filling out good representation across all of the state and all different types of schools. And we really look forward to that conversation.
All right. We continue to hear from our ADs that they like checklists. So Laura, let's finish up with the checklists of upcoming events or activities they need to take care of. Laura?
Great. Thanks, Bob, and good morning, everyone. Just a reminder that this checklist is always part of the update that you'll receive later today. A few things on the checklist around spring coaches. Make sure that all of your spring coaches are head coach certified. There are still courses available. Please make sure they get registered for that if they are not already. Ensure that you use that coach roster tool to assign your spring coaches to the right sport and activity. That is what gets them the required learning and also puts them on lists for communication from league and sections. And then, as addressed earlier from Charlie, please continue to verify completion for those coaches of all of their education requirements. A few pieces following up on winter. Many of you find that having your winter coaches complete their summer waiver requests after the winter season spreads that work out for you and keeps them engaged. That summer waiver request is open for coaches to complete and for you to approve. And we also hear from ADs that keeping up on participation numbers seasonally is helpful. There are some tools on your dashboard for you to record those each season, and we will ask for those from you in May to be submitted for the whole school year. You see on here again that in today's update, the activity cutoffs for competitive sections for non-team sports and activities will be included. Make sure that you check that. One new item on the checklist, a reminder for all schools who have baseball, the preseason memo and information on the dashboard directs you and your coaches to ensuring that you are set up for pitch count. Pitch count, again, is the service that we use to record pitch counts for baseball through the league, and your head coaches or someone on your coaching staff is responsible for submitting that data. And then finally, that reminder to register for MNI AAA coming up in 2 weeks in St. Cloud. Looking forward to seeing many of you there. Bob, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you to wrap up the meeting.
Laura is very protective of this week's checklist, so I'm going to ask her just to click on it. She had it embargoed, and many of us were smirking and laughing and texting. And Laura, great job on the checklist. It does exist. We're not going to have her review it again, but it is there for you. And I just want to thank MNI AAA, especially their leadership, for the design of the conference that they have this year. We're going to be there. It's a different environment. I encourage you to be there. If you're not on a spring break or a family vacation, join us up there. Let's spend some time together and get better. And otherwise, we're going to leave you here today. Thank you again for all your works and for your participation in our tournaments as we head into spring. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.